Hey, this is Andrew with Nerd Tier. I want to remind you to like and subscribe our channel, follow us on Instagram, and check out our shop at nerdtier.com. In this week's episode, we talk to James from Comic Cave, and we go over cleaning and grading and a little bit of heat press. So enjoy the show.
So first thing I like to do is I like to take it out of the bag, obviously with washed hands, but the reason being that you can feel grit on it. So if you know there's something on there that's kind of gritty, you're going to feel it. And you know, if somebody's doctored this a lot, like buffed it or put a coating on it, you can feel those things. It's kind of like a significantly different. So if you're not familiar with touching the books, I would highly recommend get familiar with touching a few, especially new ones, and you can feel the difference between them. First thing I look for is the spine folds, spine ticks. Spine ticks is where you have the color breaks. The spine fold won't have a color break, so you might see a little spine fold there. Getting the light helps a ton with this. Another spine, that's actually a spine tick, has a small color break.
Now, with those spine folds, are you able to like press them out? Or
folds you can. Ticks you can press out the indentation, but you're not going to bring back the color without some restoration. The kind of grand scheme of rule of things, and I do have a bone to pick with anybody who's saying, well, you can't do that because it's restoration to a book. Well, like CGC presses a book. By definition, you have now altered the actual shape of the book. You have now restored it. You're adding heat, which actually causes chemical reactions. Yeah. So when you're talking about memory to a paper, a lot of times you add moisture to it, which is water, and then you're pressing it. And so at that point, you are doing a chemical reaction to the paper. It's just not traceable, where in normal kind of means. Whereas you get something like acetone in there, and you're taking a pen mark out, or using a bleach, like needle bleach technique, and you can get some of those colors out, but you've added a chemical now, so there is residue if you look under a black light with a lot of those. The other thing is, the polish, the sheen to it. Paper's made with the comic books with a clay base inside the paper, and so what happens is when you do something too aggressive, that warps that clay, and so you either have it be removed dullness, and then you have to add some sort of clear coat. But again, the clear coat you're going to see under a black light, and also by feel. So you have a restoration that you have CG friendly, or CGC friendly, or CBCS friendly, where it's not really traceable because you can't tell the difference. Yeah. But you did do something. Versus one that you chemically adapted and it is traceable, and then they go, well, this is restored. But with chemical chemical restoration, you can do wonders to the book. You make a 3 look like a 7. I mean, you can jump it up, ridiculous amounts. And for the private collector who wants that in his house, more power to you. I'm fine with that. It's a raw book. You can actually read it. It's not in a case. Yeah. And it looks phenomenal. For show, for me, I'm like, yeah, absolutely. With comics, it's a little bit more of a political thing, I feel, with grading. So it is very subjective. What I feel are grades. I go by a chart I showed you guys, and if you want me to put it on there, I can.
I will put it. It should be showing up on the screen right now.
Oh, cool. That for me is one of the tools I use. I have a few other ones, but that one's a quick reference. So it has a lot of the accountability. Like, if you're looking at a 9.6 and you're saying, hey, how many total damage things can I have on here that equate to that? Still getting this 9.6. Most of the time, you're looking at in a new type comic, it's going to be 4 spine ticks or 4 spine creases. Or you may have a roughed edge and 2 creases. And so you can still get those high grades. And then you look at the option of, can I press those out? Can I do stuff to this that makes it unique?
What about something like this one that has, I don't know if that's pencil or something right there.
Oh, yeah. Pencil's real easy to get out. Matter of fact, if you guys want me, I can do it on live if you want.
Sure. Fix my comic? Yes, please.
Yeah. So my first one I like to use, just to kind of run by a book with this, I call it, eraser putty, but it's there's a couple of different brands you can use. This is my favorite to use. I traditionally roll it into kind of a tube, do it by hand. And it'll take out a lot of the kind of grime and grunge that goes across it, but this will take a long time. There's different techniques I've seen used. I personally do like the roll. If it's an older Silver Age, it works like an eraser. You just have to spend a little bit more time on it. So those little rolls that you can kind of pick back up. This is another fun tool. If you have something that's kind of gritty on there, it's like, grime and stuff like that, food particles.
Old boogers.
Yes, old boogers are really easy to pick off. That piece right here, I'm going really lightly with, and you can feel it, and it just removed it. Now, it does have some oil remnants from whatever was on there from whatever time period, and there's other techniques. We can go into that at a different time for time's sake, but getting oil out of comics is a trick. There are a few things I personally like to use that work really well. Some of the stuff you run into with and the sponge is any kind of a eraser sponge. If you can kind of scrape some of that stuff, again, it's going to be time consuming. Don't rush this. That's one of the big things with any comic restoration is speed and time. So I actually use this a lot of times for my erasers. I want a fresh eraser when I'm doing this. I do like really fine erasers. When I'm using my glasses, I want to make sure I'm in there perfectly well, especially if you got creases. I'll even take a razor blade and hack it into almost like a point. And I even have a pencil sharpener I use to really sharpen them too. That's a fun one to use. This is kind of my biggest cheat toy in the world. This is the one that I've never seen this ever on any live YouTube, or any kind of internet. But this is, if you go light and you learn to kind of go with the erasers, not against it, you can start to see how it starts to erase a lot of that stuff that's on there. Again, you want to clean your eraser periodically. And so you'll still have a little indentation from the pressure of that pencil, but just to give you a small idea of what it looks like, that indentation will go out once we do the pressing. There's two things to look for. The comic book page itself will have a slight matting finish. So you'll notice, if you can see the gloss, when you use an eraser, sometimes you'll have like a fine glossing to it. What I like to use is the distilled water. Sometimes I'll go in there with a cotton swab or a ear pick or earwick, and I'll go through that and just kind of take off that with the polishing aspect that gives to it. And when you press it with the moisture, those things pop right back out. It's easy, kind of cool deal. The big thing is the grime that this stuff has, and I went to grab, I do like to use a little bit bigger eraser. It's not as fast. Any of these, you can pick these up at any kind of like Walmart or wherever, but just a general white poly eraser. So if you want to just go ahead and go real lightly over this, again, it's almost like magic, so the grime's gone. So you can do that again all up and down. The tricky parts get to be where you start having tears, cuts that you could be going potentially opening up. So in those cases, you'd want to go with the actual angle of the tear. So if the tear is this way, you only want to go this way with your eraser. And again, light is better, so we don't want to go too heavy. These will take off with a lot of pressure. They will start to take off the color of a comic. So I don't want to do this since it's your comic, not mine, to show as an example.
Just do it.
Yeah, just do it anyway. So now what I do like about these is you can monitor how fast that gloss picks up on your comic. So if you kind of see where the sheen and shine is, where that other device was versus here, this one doesn't have hardly as much. You can see it's small, minute, but not anything major. It just comes out a little easier. So as far as grading goes, one of the biggest things I guess that people can see and look at, it's a no-brainer if you got a tear here, if you got a tear anywhere along here, if you got big fold creases. Color breaks is a huge issue, and once you break color, that's going to be a hit, and depending on how long it differs. If you have full color break, there are some exclusions back in the 50s, where that's how they shipped them, was folded. You're going to have those color breaks a lot, and some companies are starting to allow that to be kind of the norm, and they're not penalizing you on it. So if you already have a 4.0, they're not going to hit it again and make it a 3.5 because you had a color fold, because so many of them had that. But your spine ticks, you're going to count those, rack them up. Spine folds, where they don't have color breaks on white, is really hard to see if it does have a color break. I'm putting pressure here to see that kind of angle of the light. Obviously, you don't want to take a comic book and fold it this way because that's what causes those. But people don't realize what kind of pressure there is involved in a book causing these things. But these are the ones that hit people the most. When you get upset about a grade coming back from CGC, CBCS, PGX, any of those, that's where people get upset. I didn't see that spine fold there. I didn't see that spine tick. And it's like sometimes they're so minute, 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch, but they still hit you on it. So a good idea is to go through, like I said, my favorite thing, I get these 25 times lenses, go through it, and I mean, just fine tooth it. If you're going to send something in there, if you're sending in a $50 comic, why waste the time? $50 comic 9.6, 9.8 is not going to make a huge difference. But if you're seeing a $5,000 comic, it can go a big swing for a few ticks and a few spine folds. But if I'm looking at this book here, you start to see where people use their fingers a little aggressively on the actual book, and you'll see people that will put it maybe in an area that it got folded. These are all signs that it wasn't taken care of quite as well. The general rule of thumb is, this has a pretty significant this cut looks like inside here. It may have been aggressively either with a pen or even a sharp object. For me, like if I'm seeing these things, I'm seeing so many stack up. I'm starting to look in the realm of an 8.075 book, and then I start going down from there. But if I see something that has a couple spine ticks, obviously it's going to be that's well taken care of. Then I get a little bit more not lenient, but a little bit more lax when I'm looking around the rest of the book. I'm not looking for so many things, but you start seeing 10 plus damages on the book, then you start going, okay, well, how many more am I going to get hit with when I send this in to get graded? White, way easier to grade, not grade, but to really get away with certain things that you can't with on blacks. Any black ink, dark ink, you will start to see things a lot more aggressively. These spine ticks will show that white paper like it's a sore thumb, and those are the harder ones to even fold out to do any of this stuff with. Now this one, it's got the full spine fold. If you can see the angle, I'm just going to move it around here. You'll see that whole fold line right there where that staple line is, where it just goes all the way down the book. That's something that they will look at and a lot of times penalize you for. And if you're at that one away from getting a 9.6 or one away from a 9.8, that's the one you definitely want to have pressed. They offer those services because it makes it look like it was when it came out of the factory, new to you. Most of them in a perfect scenario, but even that, a lot of the ones that come out of the factory aren't perfect. They come out just like that. Right.
So if you had to guess right now on the price or on the grade of those 3 books,
this one here, because I'm counting quite a few ticks and quite a few folds. Again, you have to open up the book, look inside. Again, we have some, little tear there that I didn't notice from the outside. You'll see some stuff in here. Now, in some cases, they will allow this because it's a production commonality. So if you look here, there's actually a cut on that page there too, and it goes back further and further. So that was actually a blade that cut it. So when they're doing the cutting press, there are some exceptions. One being an example of the Spider-Man ASM 300. They have one over here with a lot of them that CGC will ignore now because that was a common entity with the production of that book. So when it's a production of the book, you can't really say it was not taken care of because it came that way. But would somebody pay more for one without? Probably, but I've had people who've ran away from it because it had that little cut there, and it's like CGC's not going to score it any different. Yeah. So if that's what you're buying it for, don't run away. But so again, I'm going to look through the book. I want to look at staples. That's a big thing. Staples being loose, rust. Want to make sure that those staples are good inside. There are people who will take those, replace them, reset the entire book. And I'm going to go through the book a little bit more intricately if I'm grading this, real hard. But you see that actual cut went all the way through the back end.
Oh, okay.
So now see, some of those spine folds that we saw in the front aren't mirrored to the back, but we have different spine folds back here. Not a color break, but a spine fold. Everything in here, looks fairly good. I wouldn't probably score this extremely high. I'd probably put this at an 8 just because of some of the stuff. Now, if I pressed it, it doesn't really need a cleaning. But as far as the pressing goes, I could take that to an 8.5 pretty comfortably and maybe a 9.0. So those are the things where pressing does benefit you. It depends how good your presser is and then how long you sit. I personally don't like to do the rushed pressings. I see too much memory and paper come back a month later or 2 months later with people who've done that kind of work. I do 48 hours. So I press it for 24 on one side, flip it over, press it for 24 on the other. I do moisture only the first time unless there's a reason I need to do it on the back. And it's I do humidifiers, micro humidifiers and nebulizers basically.
Okay.
And so those don't leave watermarks, and as long as you use distilled water, you don't have to worry about mineral deposits, stuff like that. And I'll sit them in there for different time periods, depending on the book and how rough it is, but anywhere from about an hour to 4 hours. It's really nice to do those with Silver Age books because the more brittle those pages are, when you press them, you can crack them. Do it with moisture, you don't crack them.
Yeah,
It's a beautiful thing. And again, when it's done, it's already flat. You send it in, you're not going to buy that book. If you send it into CGC or the grading companies, you're not buying that book to read it. Now you're buying it as an investment, and you're buying it off of a looks.
Yeah, I mean, me and Brian were talking about it earlier. See, we want a CGC just as a nice little wall ornament.
Yep.
But that's about all. I will put a link to the cheat sheet, and we will definitely be doing many more of these. So thank you guys, and have a good night.